It was a wild night towards the end of March. Dark clouds were racing across the sky and great gusts of wind blew through the gap in the houses into the yard. Sebastian, Tim's little grey and white cat, had been out all day. Tim was sure that he would come home for supper, but there was no sign of him. As Tim got into bed, he heard a burst of hail rattling against the window. I expect Sebastian can take care of himself," Tim muttered, "but I wish he'd come home." The bed didn't feel right without Sebastian, who always slept near Tim's feet. Tim pulled the blankets up around his ears and lay there listening to the wind until at last his eyes closed. He'd been asleep for 3 or 4 hours when the window of his attic bedroom fell open with a bang. Tim woke up. He sat up in bed. The moon had come out from behind the clouds, and in the moonlight he saw a broomstick come flying through his window. The broomstick clattered to the floor. Tim was still half asleep. He stared at the broomstick for a moment, then suddenly he realised what it meant. He scrambled out of bed and pulled open the top drawer of his chest of drawers. He put in his hand and felt about under his clothes. His fingers touched the magic token, the silver coin, with a hole in the middle that hung on the silver chain. He pulled out the coin and hung the chain around his neck. He felt for his box of matches. He found it, struck a match, and lit the candle by his bed. Tobias the cat was standing on the foot of the bed, looking at him. Tobias's green eyes shone in the light of the candle. His black fur glistened. He looked at Tim disapprovingly. "It would save a lot of time and trouble if you remembered to wear the magic token Melinda gave you," said Tobias. "Why do you keep it in that drawer? It's no good in there. You have to wear it if you're going to see the hidden people." "I don't want anyone to see it," said Tim. "They wouldn't see it if you wore it under your clothes," said Tobias. "Yes, they would," said Tim. "I have to take my sweater off for gym at school, so I can't wear it during the day." "This isn't day, it's the night," said Tobias. "Well, you got it on now, and you'll need it. I've come to take you to see Melinda." A gust of cold wind sent the curtains streaming out into the room. The flame of the candle blew sideways. Tim shivered. He went to the window and shut it. The old tree in the yard outside was tossing its branches in the wind. The street lamp was out, but Tim could see the tree waving in the moonlight. "Can you fly a broomstick in this gale?" he asked. "How do you think I got here?" said Tobias. "I didn't walk." "Be quick and get dressed. It may be a bit of a rough ride, but I'll get you there. You needn't worry about that. I like a gale myself. It's ever so much more exciting." His green eyes glowed even more brightly. Tim pulled on his clothes. He put in his anorak, pulled the hood up over his head, and tied the drawstrings tightly. It was going to be very cold on a broomstick. "Ready?" asked Tobias, as Tim put on his gloves and blew out the candle. "I think so," said Tim. Tobias twitched his tail. The window fell open again, and the broomstick lifted off the floor. Tobias jumped onto one end and rode the broomstick out of the window. It hovered in the air just outside. "Come on," said Tobias. "Don't be slow. Melinda doesn't like to be kept waiting." Tim climbed onto the windowsill and slipped his legs over the broomstick. As soon as he was sitting on it, he let go of the sill with one hand and gripped the stick. The broomstick was tossing up and down in the wind like a boat on the sea. He moved his other hand across from the sill to the stick and gripped it. "All set," he said. Tobias twitched his tail and they swept up over the roof. At once they felt the full force of the gale. The wind tossed the broomstick up into the sky as if it were a leaf. Tim clung to it with all his strength. Tobias stood on the end, balancing like a man on a surfboard, except that Tobias didn't fall off. He stood there as if he and the broomstick were glued together. As the gust of wind passed, the broomstick raced forwards like a boat rushing down the side of a great wave. The next gust tossed it up into the air again, and as the gust of wind passed, they rushed forward once more. Tim had no chance to watch where they were going. It was all he could do to cling on to the broomstick. His hands and arms began to ache with the effort of holding on. They were heading straight into the gale. He was just beginning to think that he would have to ask Tobias to go to earth for a time to give him a rest when the broomstick tilted downwards. Tim saw Melinda's cottage below him, and the next moment They were hovering a little way off the ground outside Melinda's door. Tim slipped off the broomstick thankfully and stood up. Tobias jumped down and the broomstick clattered to the ground. The door of the little house opened. Melinda, the safe witch, stood in the doorway. Her white hair blew back in the wind. She pulled her old red shawl tightly around her. "Come in quickly," she said. "This is no night to be out." Tobias ran in through the door. Tim followed him, pushing back the hood of his anorak. Melinda shut the door behind them. There was a bright fire burning on the hearth, and a little grey and white cat was sitting in front of it, washing himself. "Sebastian!" cried Tim. "I wondered where you were." The little grey and white cat ran across the room and took a flying leap onto Tim's shoulder. "Err," he said, rubbing his head against Tim's ear. "Sit down by the fire, Tim," said Melinda. "You must be cold." Tim stepped over the tiger skin rug that lay in the front of the fire and sat down on a chair. Sebastian jumped down onto his knee, purring loudly. Tobias sat on the hearth with his bright green eyes fixed on Melinda's face. It was warm by the fire. Tim managed to undo his anorak and take it off, with Sebastian still purring on his knee. Melinda came slowly across the room to another chair. She sat down quietly and gazed into the fire. Tim listened to the wind roaring outside. It was one of the wildest nights he could remember. Melinda sighed and looked up. "I'm sorry to bring you out on such a night, Tim," she said. "I would have asked the others to come too had it not been blowing such a gale. Aaron and Jessica and Simon should be here, but I was afraid the younger ones might fall if they rode on broomsticks on a night like this. And even Tobias can only carry one of you on a broomstick when the wind is so strong. Sebastian will take you home when you'll be riding with the wind and not against it. Only Tobias can fly a broomstick against a gale like this. And you can tell them everything I have to say, Tim. I have to tell you something about the talisman." Tim looked up quickly. "The talisman?" he exclaimed. "The wild witches haven't found it, have they?" The talisman was a magic token. It was a little golden flute. Whoever had the talisman would make very powerful magic. The wild witches had had it once. When they had the talisman, they'd driven the hidden people out of their home in Hollow Hill. If the wild witches had been able to keep the talisman, they would have ruled over the whole countryside. Tim and Jessica and Simon had gone to Hollow Hill where the talisman was hidden. Jessica had managed to get it back from the wild witches, and Tim and Simon had taken it back to Melinda. Tim had never seen the talisman himself. Only a girl or a woman could look at the talisman without being harmed by its magic. If a boy or a man saw it, he forgot everything he had ever known. Jessica and Melinda had kept the talisman safely wrapped in a golden cloth when Tim and Simon were there. Melinda had used the talisman to make magic. She'd driven the witches away and then she'd hidden the talisman in some secret place. If the wild witches had found it again, they would be very dangerous indeed. Tim looked anxiously at Melinda. Melinda shook her head. "No, Tim," she said. "It's not as bad as that. No one has found the talisman, but they are out looking for it." "The wild witches?" asked Tim. "The wind witches," said Melinda. "The wind witches and their friends. You remember the wind witches? They fly on the wind so they can cross running water." Tim nodded. He still saw the wind witches sometimes in his dreams, riding across the sky on the wind. "The stump people are helping them, the invisible people who clothe themselves in old tree stumps." Tim shivered. He remembered the stump people only too well. He remembered seeing a pair of slanting green eyes suddenly open in the dead stump of a tree. It was only when you saw their eyes that you knew the stump people were inside the old wood. "The wind witches came south looking for the talisman while you were looking for your burglars," said Melinda. "I had to send Tobias and Jared. I needed everyone here to watch the wind witches and guard the talisman." "Well, I knew you needed them for something important," said Tim, "and they'd really done everything for us. We did arrest ourselves, but the burglars were caught." Melinda nodded. "I heard that," she said. "I was sure you could manage, but I was sorry to call them back. And now I need your help again, Tim. I want you to take the talisman north. to take it to a place where the wind witches and the wild witches and all their evil friends can never go. I thought I could hide it from them here, but I can't. My magic is not strong enough. They don't know where the talisman is now, but they soon will, and then no one will be safe. But there is a place where they cannot go, a place where the talisman would be safe from them forever. Do you remember Alan Tremaine and Grandmother Rune? Tim stared at her. Of course I do, he said. Grandmother Rune had given him the silver chain he wore around his neck with a magic token. She lived in the far north in Scotland with Alan Tremaine. Grandmother Rune was one of the hidden people, but Alan Tremaine was a strange one. His father had been one of the hidden people, but his mother was one of the ordinary folk. He looked just like one of the ordinary folk himself, but he could see the hidden people without the help of any magic token. Both Grandmother Rune and Alan Tremaine had been very kind to Tim. They had helped him against the wind witches and against the stone men. Do you remember a ring of trees near Alan Tremaine's house? Asked Melinda. Tim nodded. There is a great flat stone in the centre of the ring, said Melinda. I know, said Tim. He remembered it very well. Grandmother Rune had worked magic over it. Melinda stopped speaking. A gust of wind roared past the house louder than before. I'll go, said Tim slowly. We'll have to think of a way of getting there, but I'll go. But couldn't Aaron and I take it? You could wrap it up in the golden cloth so that we don't see it. It's going to be dangerous, isn't it? Jessica's a year younger than I am, and Simon's younger still. Jessica must go, said Melinda, even if it is wrapped in its golden cloth. A boy or a man should not carry the talisman for so long a time. I know she'd do it, said Tim. I just didn't want her to run into danger if we could help it. We can't help it, Tim, said Melinda. A girl must take the talisman. She must be one of the ordinary folk, and she must be able to see the hidden people. Only one girl can do that. Jessica. There is no one else. How on earth are we going to get away? Asked Tim. You must wait until school has ended, said Melinda. Then you'll be free to go. But Jessica's aunt and uncle will never let her go off just like that, said Tim, and I don't know what Aunt May will say. Tim lived with his Aunt May. She'd let him go off before with Aaron before. They'd gone camping, but this was different. I know, said Melinda, but I think they will let you go. In a day or two, your aunt will get a letter from Alan Tremaine inviting you to spend your Easter holidays with him. Aaron's parents will get one too, and so will Jessica's aunt and uncle. I think they will let them go with you. Alan Tremaine will send tickets for you all to go up by coach, but you must not really go that way, that would be too dangerous. The wind witches will be watching the roads. You must set out as if you were going by coach, but instead you must come here, to me. Then we will fetch the talisman together, we'll take it from its hiding place. You must all fly north with the nightmares, carrying the talisman with you. Alan Tremaine and Grandmother Rune will be waiting for you. Now, you must go home, Tim, and talk to Jessica and the others, and you must wait for the letters from Alan Tremaine. Melinda got up. Come, Tim, she said. Sebastian will take you home. Will Sebastian come north with us? Asked Tim. Melinda smiled. Of course, she said. Nothing would keep him here if you were flying north with the talisman. Oh, said Sebastian. He jumped off Tim's knee and ran to the door. Tim followed him slowly. Melinda opened the door and they stepped out into the wind. Sebastian ran to the broomstick and twitched his tail. The broomstick lifted off the ground. Goodbye, Tim, said Melinda. I shall see you again before long. Goodbye, said Tim. I'll talk to the others. He sat down on the broomstick and gripped it with both hands. Sebastian twitched his tail. The broomstick shot up into the air. A gust of wind caught it and tossed it higher. The broomstick flew on faster and faster as the gale swept them towards town. Tim woke late the next morning. The sun was streaming in through his window. The broomstick was lying on the floor where Sebastian had left it the night before. Sebastian himself had disappeared. Tim got out of bed and looked into the yard. The wind was still blowing, but it was not as strong as it had been. He was standing at the window looking out when he heard Aunt May call up the stairs. Tim, breakfast ready? Are you up? Coming, Tim called. He pulled on his clothes, he pushed a broomstick under his bed, then he picked up his scarf and hung it over the curtain rail so that it hung down over the window. That was a signal Tim and his friends had agreed to make when they ever wanted to meet. A scarf hanging in the window meant everyone meet at the old tree. The others must have been watching the yard very closely. As soon as Tim went outside, they came running across the yard to join him by the old tree. Simon got there first. "What's happened?" he called out as he ran. "Have you seen Tobias?" "Yes," said Tim. "I've a lot to tell you." Aaron and Jessica ran up. "Is it good news, Tim?" asked Aaron. "I don't know if you call it good news," said Tim, "but Melinda sent Tobias for me last night. She would have asked him to bring you too, but the gale was just too strong. Tobias could only manage one on his broomstick. Sebastian couldn't fly against the gale at all." "Is Sebastian all right?" asked Jessica. "He's fine," said Tim. "He was with Melinda." "Well, what did Melinda say?" Simon asked impatiently. "She wants us to go north," said Tim. "All of us?" asked Simon. "Yes, it's about the talisman. Melinda says it isn't safe where it is at the moment. She wants to take the talisman north." A cold gust of wind blew through the gaps in the houses. Jessica shivered and pulled her anorak around her. "Let's go up to my room out of this wind," said Aaron. "There'll be a lot to talk about. It's too cold here. Come on." Everyone agreed that it was a good idea. Aaron led the way across the yard and up to his attic room. He switched on his electric fire and they settled down on the chairs and on the sofa bed. "Now then," said Aaron, "let's hear all about it, Tim. Tell us everything Melinda told you." Tim told them what Melinda had said. "You don't have to go, Jess, if you don't want to," he ended. "If the talisman's properly wrapped up in its gold cloth, I'm sure it would be all right if Aaron and I took it north." "Well, I do want to go," said Jessica. "At least, I'm not sure that I exactly want to, but I will. I shan't mind. If I'm not on my own, that is. I had to go into Hollow Hill by myself. That was the awful thing. It won't be like that this time." "We've got to go," said Simon. "We've never ridden on the nightmares." "Do you think your aunt and uncle will let you go?" asked Aaron. "They don't know Alan Tremaine." "Oh, they'll let us go all right," said Simon. "You'll see, Auntie Lizzie will be glad to see the back of us. She doesn't really want us around at all." "We'll have to wait and see what happens when the letters come from Alan Tremaine," said Tim. "You needn't worry," said Simon. "We'll be coming. You bet we will." When Tim got home after school the following Thursday, he found Aunt May waiting for him. She had a letter in her hand. "Didn't you tell me you met a Mr. Tremaine that time you and Aaron went camping in Scotland?" she asked as Tim came in. "Yeah," said Tim. "Well, he's written to me," said Aunt May. "He wants you to go up there for Easter." "Can I go?" asked Tim. "Well, I suppose so," said Aunt May. "He sent a coach ticket for you. He says that you did all kinds of things around the place for him last time. He's got a few more odd jobs for you. And he says that you can have a holiday too. I'm glad you made yourself useful, Tim." Tim grinned. If Aunt May knew the kind of things around the place which he'd done last time with Alan Tremaine, Tim thought, she would faint right away. "Mr. Tremaine says he's written to Jessica and Simon too," said Aunt May. "Perhaps I'd better go and cross and see Mrs. Staines if you think they'll want to go." Mrs. Staines was Jessica's Auntie Lizzie. "I expect it might help," said Tim. "I think I'll go over before tea," said Aunt May. "I saw her come in just now." Aunt May put on a coat and went upstairs. Tim saw her go across the yard. It was good of Aunt May to go, he thought. It might make all the difference Jessica being allowed to come. Aunt May was away for nearly half an hour, and Tim was beginning to get worried when he saw her come out of the door of Jessica's house. He ran upstairs to greet her. "Well, that's all right," said Aunt May as she came in. "They can both go. Mrs. Staines wasn't too sure at first, but I've talked her into it. You'll have to keep an eye on them, Tim, and see they're all right. I said you would." "I'll try," said Tim. Aunt May had no idea how difficult that might be. "They've got tickets too," said Aunt May, "so you'll all be going off at the beginning of April. I expect Aaron will go too?" "I'm sure he will," said Tim. "Well, that'll be nice for you," said Aunt May, "and Aaron can help you look after the younger ones. Aaron's a boy you can trust. The four of them met at the old tree later in the evening as daylight was fading. "We're coming!" shouted Simon, jumping down the steps in the front of the house and rushing across to Tim and Aaron, who were already by the tree. "We're coming!" "Auntie Lizzie's had a letter. She says we can go," said Jessica, running after him. "Told you so," said Simon. "She's glad to be rid of us." "Are you coming, Aaron?" asked Jessica. Aaron nodded. "Yes," he said. "It wasn't difficult. Tim and I have been before." They stayed and talked over their plans for an hour. They decided to leave as soon as possible after school was over. The tickets were for April the 3rd. School ended on April the 2nd. The coach left early at 7 o'clock in the morning. They would each carry a rucksack packed with their own things. They would meet in the yard at 6:30 and walk over towards a coach station together. "But we shan't go as far as the coach station," said Tim. "Before we get there, we'll turn off through the factory yard to the path along the canal. If we go that way, we shan't meet anyone. It won't take us long to get to Melinda's cottage. We'll have to stay there all day anyway. Melinda will have to get the talisman and the nightmares won't come till after sunset." Simon gave a little jump of excitement. "Are we really going to fly north on the nightmares?" he asked. "We'll have to," said Tim. "Melinda said that would be the safest way. The Wind Witches will expect us to go on the coach." "That's fantastic," said Simon. "It's pretty good," said Aaron. "It's even better than flying on a broomstick." "I can't wait," Simon said. "You'll have to," said Tim, "but you won't have to wait very long." Tim sent a message to Melinda that night. He wrote a note telling her that Alan Tremaine's letter had come and they were all going north. He tied the note to the handle of the broomstick, which was still under his bed. Sebastian was very late. He came in for his supper just as Tim was going upstairs. Tim fed him, and then the little cat ran upstairs with him to the attic. Tim pulled the broomstick out and showed Sebastian the note. "This has to go to Melinda, Sebastian," he said. "Can you take it?" Sebastian purred cheerfully. He flicked his tail. Tim's window dropped open. Sebastian jumped onto the end of the broomstick and rode it out of the window and into the night. Tim packed his rucksack on the last day of March. He was thinking so hard about what they were going to do that the next morning he didn't remember it was April Fool's Day. When Simon met him in the yard and said that Melinda had sent a message to say that the nightmares had been captured by the Wind Witches, Tim believed him. So did Aaron, who joined them. Simon burst into a shout of laughter and cried, "April Fool!" Aaron looked at him without smiling. "Don't joke about the Wind Witches, Simon," he said. "Someone might hear you. Are you wearing your silver coin?" "No," said Simon. "I don't wear it for school." "I'm not wearing my token either," said Aaron. "Remember, there may be hidden people about. We just don't know if they're there when we're not wearing the magic tokens. It isn't safe to talk about them or to talk about what we're going to do. You don't know who might be listening." That made even Simon stop laughing, and they all went on their way to school very quietly. As soon as school was over the next day, they met by the tree in the yard. "The coach is supposed to leave at 7 tomorrow morning," said Tim. "Meet here at the tree at 6:30. It isn't far to the coach station. We'll all set out as if we're going there and then turn off to Melinda's, all right?" Everyone agreed. "Don't try and bring too much," said Aaron. "Just a change of clothes and pyjamas." "I'm going to bring the box Melinda gave me," said Jessica. "We can use it to drive off the witches, if we have to." Melinda had given Jessica a beautiful little wooden musical box with a bird carved on the lid. When the box was opened, the box played a tune. The tune was magic. If there were witches about, the tune called up a wind, and the witches were blown far away. "I'll bring my owl," said Simon. The little ivory owl was Melinda's gift to Simon. If Simon put him in the moonlight, the owl came alive and flew away, but he always came back. "I'm not sure how the owl can help us," said Tim. "Wouldn't it be safer if you left him at home? There'll be witches about, you know, even if we keep them away from us." "All right," said Simon. "Perhaps I'd better leave him. He's very small. I don't want anything to happen to him." They went off to check their things. Tim was very restless all evening. His rucksack was packed and ready and he had nothing to do. He unpacked the rucksack to check he remembered everything and then packed it all over again. Aunt May went off to the shop after tea. The shop was open late that night and she was helping out as she often did. Tim wandered from the attic to the basement and back to the attic again, wondering whether he'd forgotten anything. He got a spare battery out of the drawer in his room. He was just putting it into his rucksack when he heard a whistle outside. It was almost dark in the yard now. The street light had come on and there were shadows under the old tree. Tim's silver coin was lying beside his rucksack on the silver chain. He picked it up and slipped the chain over his head. He switched off the light and went back to the window. He looked down into the yard. Tim drew a quick breath. A short little fat man was standing there under the tree. He had a dark red cutaway coat, his hair was white, and he had a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on the end of his nose. The lamplight shone on a brass buckle on his belt and the brass buckles on his shoes. Tim stared down in amazement. He knew that man. He'd first met him one night in a storm when he was going to Melinda's house. He had lived in an old cottage in a wood. He had a big stone fireplace and a wolf skin hung on the wall. Tim had seen him later with a wolf at his side. The last time I'd seen him was when the little man disappeared into the pool by the whispering trees. Now here he was again. Tim looked into the shadows around the tree, but he could see no sign of a wolf. As he stood watching, the man looked up. He stared straight at Tim's window. There was such a look of hatred on his face that Tim stepped back. "He hates me," Tim said under his breath. "He really hates me. We've got to be careful." The man turned away and took a few steps towards the house where Jessica and Simon lived. Tim could see a light in Jessica's window, but the curtains were drawn. He saw the man take a box out of his coat pocket. The man bent down and pressed something onto the gate of the house. He put the box back in his pocket and walked off through the gap in the houses, out of the yard. Tim looked across at Aaron's house. The light was on in Aaron's window. Aaron hadn't drawn his curtains yet, and Tim thought he would try and flash a message across to him. He got his torch out of his rucksack and switched it on and swung it around, making a circle of the light in the window. But Aaron must have been doing something inside. He wasn't looking out, and there was no answering flash. Tim put on his anorak. He slipped his torch into his pocket and went downstairs. Aunt May must have come back. He could hear her in the kitchen. He crossed the hall quietly. He opened the front door, stepped outside, and shut the door softly behind him. He looked quickly to the left and the right. There was no one in the yard. He went across to the gate of Jessica's house. He pulled out his torch and switched it on. At first he could see nothing different about the gate at all, but then he saw a little spike, like a big thorn, sticking up on the latch. It was just in the place where it would dig into a finger if anyone opened the gate. Tim looked up at the house. As he did so, the light in Jessica's room went out. She must be getting into bed. It was too late to go and see her. He pulled out his handkerchief and wrapped it round his fingers, and then, very carefully, he pulled the thorn off the latch. Some kind of glue had been used to stick it there. It felt as if the glue hadn't quite set. The thorn came off, with a little thread of glue still sticking to it. Tim carried it carefully back to his own house. He went inside as quietly as he could. Aunt May was still working away in the kitchen. Tim went upstairs, treading very softly, back to his room. He switched on the light and looked at the thorn. It was black like the gate. Jessica would never have seen it. When he looked closely, he could see that the pointed end of the thorn was red, as if it had been dipped into something. Tim took an empty matchbox out of his drawer. He put the thorn into it and then put the matchbox into his rucksack. He wanted to show the thorn to Melinda. He ran downstairs and dropped his handkerchief into the basket where Aunt May kept the dirty clothes ready to take to the laundrette. Then he went back to his room, took out a clean handkerchief and looked out of a window. There was no one in the yard. Aaron's light was out now, as well as Jessica's. They must be going to bed early because they'd be getting up so early in the morning. Tim decided there was nothing more he could do that night. If he was first in the yard that morning, he would warn the others to be careful. He put his rucksack down beside his bed. There was a mew at the door. He opened it and Sebastian ran in. Aunt May must have given Sebastian his supper, because he ran across the room and jumped onto the bed. Tim stroked him, and Sebastian purred loudly. "I'm so glad you're back," said Tim. He got into his pyjamas and climbed into bed. "Good night, Sebastian," he said, switching off the light. Tim had 2 strings from the light switch to his bed, so he could turn the light off or on without getting up. Sebastian curled up at his feet, and Tim went to sleep to the sound of a little cat purring. Tim got up very early. Aunt May had asked Aaron and Jessica and Simon to come and have breakfast with him before they left, and Tim and Sebastian were up and about in the yard by 5:30. Tim inspected the gate of Aaron's house. It seemed all right. He had another look at the gates of Jessica's house too, but he didn't find any more thorns. All the same, he put on his gloves and opened the gates, propping them open with a stone. Aaron came out whilst he was doing it. "Hello, Tim," said Aaron. "Is anything wrong?" Tim told him what he'd seen the night before. "We've got to be really careful," said Aaron. "We'll have to look after Jessica. Jessica is the one they'll be after. She's the one who has to carry the talisman." "How do they know where we're going?" said Tim. "How can they know that?" "They may have heard us talking," said Aaron. "We can't see them when we're not wearing our magic tokens, but they can see us, and they can hear us too." "We'll be wearing our tokens night and day from now on," said Tim. Jessica and Simon came out into the yard and ran across to join Tim and Aaron. "Did you open our gate, Tim?" Simon cried as he came over. "Why?" Tim told him about the man the night before. Simon was impressed. "They must know we're going," he said. "Do you think they'll try and stop us getting to Melinda?" "I don't know," said Tim, "but we should be all right as far as Melinda's house. It'll be daylight and we'll all be together." Aunt May opened the front door and looked out into the yard. "Breakfast ready!" she called. The 4 of them went inside. They left their rucksacks in the hall and went down to the kitchen. Aunt May had cooked a big breakfast for them. They had cornflakes and eggs and bacon and toast and marmalade and tea. They all felt better for it. Somehow, it was difficult to believe that the hidden people would hurt them while they were eating eggs and bacon by a bright fire. After breakfast, they set out together for the coach station, with Sebastian trotting along happily at Tim's heels. Aaron had said goodbye to his parents early that morning, and Simon and Jessica had said goodbye to Uncle Joe and Auntie Lizzie the night before. Aunt May waved them off from the front door. They started off through town. A few cars went past them, but there weren't many people about. They came to the yard of a big factory and turned off the road to go through it. Tim kept looking around to make sure they weren't being followed, but no one seemed to be taking any interest in them. By the time they came to the path along the canal, the sun was up. Tim was thankful to see the sunshine. If the witches and their friends had been about, he was sure they would have called up a storm. There was very little wind too. That was another good sign. Wind witches needed a wind to carry them where they wanted to go. When they reached the lock gates, they sat down to eat some apples which Aaron had brought with him. They all felt very cheerful as they sat there in the bright sunshine. "What shall we do when we've hidden the talisman?" asked Simon. "Could we go north and see the Moor people?" Tim had told them about his adventures with the Moor people and the Iron Men. "Let's get there first," said Jessica. "There'll be time enough to think of other things to do when we're safely there with Alan Tremaine." "Listen," she whispered suddenly. "What's that?" They heard a rustling in one of the trees near them. They looked up and saw a magpie fly off from one of the branches. Do you think the magpie has anything to do with the witches?" Jessica spoke in a whisper. "I don't know," said Tim, "but I don't think we ought to talk about what we're planning to do. Not till we get to Melinda's. You don't know who's about." "There aren't any hidden people, or we'd see them," said Simon. "We don't know if there are other creatures who can help them," said Tim. "If you saw Tobias, you might think he was just a cat. But he's one of the hidden people, and Sebastian's one of the strange ones. Come on, let's go to Melinda's house." They set off along the canal bank. They hadn't far to go. They could see Hollow Hill, where some of their friends among the hidden people lived, across the fields to their left. They saw the ring of trees on the top of the hill. There was a bonfire burning on Hollow Hill. They could see the flames leaping up and a pillar of smoke rising into the still air. The sunshine felt warm and spring-like. The trees were still bare, but the grass was a fresh green. "There's the little bridge," said Jessica at last. "And there's Melinda's house," cried Simon as they came to the lane where the house stood. Even Melinda's house looked different in the sunshine. There were primroses and violets in the garden. They opened the gate and went across to the door. The face on the knocker looked at them just as sourly as it always did. The spring sunshine made no difference to that. Tim picked up a stone, but before he could knock, the door opened and Melinda stood there. She smiled when she saw them and stood to one side. "Come in, all of you," she said. "I'm glad that you've got here so early. It means that you had no problem on the way." "It was easy," said Simon. "We just walked here. No one tried to stop us." "They didn't try today," said Tim, "but I think someone tried last night." He told Melinda about the little man with the spectacles and the thorn on the handle of the gate. As Melinda listened to the story, her face grew grave. "You are right to think of that man as an enemy," she said. "His name is Glint. Percival Glint. He is very dangerous and he is very clever. He must have escaped the underground passages below the whispering trees." "You know what this means, Tim? It means that the witches and their friends know that you're going north. I had hoped that you might get away before they knew anything." "Does it mean they'll try and stop us?" asked Aaron. Melinda nodded. "Yes," she said. "They have tried already. Have you still got the thorn, Tim?" Tim took out the matchbox and handed it to Melinda. She opened it and inspected the thorn. "Yes," she said. "I thought so. The thorn is poisoned. If you had pricked your hand on this, Jessica, you would have been ill for many weeks. Before you were better, the Wind Witches would have found the talisman. You did well to find this, Tim. You must keep watch day and night for anything the Wind Witches and their friends may do. And Jessica, you must keep a special watch. You are the one they will try to stop." Jessica stared anxiously at Melinda. All her feeling of happiness in going off with the others had gone. Then Melinda smiled at her, and she felt better. "Don't worry, Jessica," said Melinda, putting a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "I know that Tim and Aaron will look after you, and Simon will too. You are the one who must carry the talisman, but they will be there to guard you. You will soon be riding the nightmares, flying north." "Have you got the talisman here?" asked Simon. Melinda shook her head. "I shall only take the talisman from its hiding place at the last moment, just before you leave," she said. "That is the safest thing to do. We can do nothing until tonight. We shall spend the day in the mound in Piper's Wood. The hidden people have made a room ready for you there so that you can sleep. You must get used to sleeping by day so we can travel by night. But I have something for you before you go." She went to a cupboard and took out a little glass bottle with a golden cap. It was full of a strange blue liquid. "Do you remember this, Jessica?" she asked. "It is the same magic drink that I gave you before. There is enough liquid in this bottle to make you invisible for an hour. I've not been able to make any more, but if you are attacked by the friends of the Wind Witches, an hour should be long enough for you to escape. Keep the bottle in your pocket so that it's always with you. Then, if you need it, you can drink the liquid, and you will be invisible. No one will be able to see you, not even Tim or the hidden people." She handed Jessica the bottle. Jessica put it in the pocket of her anorak. "Now it's time to go to the mound," said Melinda. "Come." They followed Melinda into the garden. Sebastian kept as close to Tim as he could. Aaron shut the door behind them, and they all made their way across the lane to a gate. They went through the gate and across the field to Piper's Wood. Piper's Wood stood on a little hill just beyond Melinda's house. There was a great mound of earth in the middle of the wood. A tunnel lined with stones led into the mound. They had been there before. There was a secret passage from the mound to Hollow Hill, and Jessica, Tim and Simon had once gone that way. They'd never been into the rooms in the mound itself, but they knew that the whole mound was hollow. The hidden people had lived there when the witches drove them out of Hollow Hill. They followed Melinda into the tunnel. Lighted lanterns hung from the roof. Melinda stopped at a wooden door. She opened it. They went into a big room. A lantern stood on a stone shelf sticking out from one of the walls. 4 heaps of dry bracken lay on the floor. Each was covered by a bright rug, although they could see the bracken sticking out at the sides. A pillow lay on each bed, and was a pile of rugs on a chair. "Lie down and make yourselves comfortable, all of you," said Melinda. "You must sleep until just before sunset. I will come and wake you. We will have supper together, and then we can take the talisman from its hiding place." "I'll never sleep in the daytime," said Simon, "even if you take the lantern so that it's dark." Melinda looked at him and smiled. "I think you will, Simon," she said. "Lie down and see what happens." They slipped out of their rucksacks and lay down on the beds. They made themselves comfortable. Sebastian curled up near Tim's feet as he always did. Melinda covered each of them with a rug. Then she took the lantern from its shelf and went to the door. She put the lantern down and turned towards them. She took a little box out of a pocket under a shawl. She opened it and sprinkled a little silver powder onto the palm of one hand. "Watch the sparks fly upwards," she said. "When the sparks go out, you will be asleep." Melinda picked up the lantern, stepped through the doorway and closed the door quietly behind her. Tim, Aaron, Jessica and Simon lay watching the sparks as they floated higher and higher. Simon's eyes were the first to close. One by one, the sparks went out, but before the last one had gone out, all 4 children were fast asleep.